Hey, I've been wanting to make a video here for a little while talking about my current job search and my plans to possibly relocate to Japan, but possibly anywhere on planet Earth, to be honest with you. Um, I just filled out a job application the other day that asked me the intentionally vague and frustrating question of, please describe an experience that has changed who you are in the world. And then after that it specifies 200 words. So this is asking you a supposedly profoundly meaningful and profoundly relevant to the job you're applying for question, and then it's giving you 200 words to do it. So this is really the Twitter generation of define your bare your soul for the world in 200 words. This particular job was indeed relevant to my past work experience doing humanitarian work and research in Southeast Asia. So I attempted in only 200 words to tell the heartbreaking story of a woman in Laos who, during the Vietnam War, a war that, by the way, is referred to as the American War over in that part of the world, if you want to sound sophisticated, especially in speaking the local language. During the Vietnam War, she had to flee up into the mountains and across the border from Laos into Vietnam to escape U.S. bombardment. Pretty common story, that general outline of it at least. And while she was working her way along one of these mud roads through the mountains, a helicopter, an American helicopter, came down from the sky to slaughter them, even though they were, of course, just civilians fleeing. That also was fairly common, quite well documented too, on the whole, in the war. Anyway, so this helicopter came down and shot them, or shot at them, I might say, and they scattered and tried to hide themselves in the water of the river, or just fled in all directions, as civilians will do in those circumstances. And one detail of the story that definitely rings true, by the way: those big guns that are bolted onto helicopter gunships, it's nothing like a rifle. It's not like being shot by a pistol or a handheld rifle. This has come up a few different times in my political science career, so to speak. If you get hit by a round from one of those guns, because they're designed to be able to at least stop a truck, but quite possibly to stop a tank, and also to go a long distance and still have tremendous power, it'll tear your body in half, getting hit by just one shot. And if you get hit clean in the midsection, it can carry all of your internal organs out of your body, that kind of thing, because the amount of energy is so tremendous. I'm just now thinking that a couple of people might have clicked on this video not at all expecting to hear a gory war story, and that's exactly what you're about to get. Anyway, in 200 words, I tried to tell this heartbreaking story that I heard in Laos, of moving through the mountains to try to escape the ravages of war. And there was one woman who was carrying her own newborn baby, still breastfeeding, when she was shot by this helicopter gunship in these circumstances. And the bullet probably hit her in the hips and took the bottom half of her body clean off. Definitely took both of her legs off. And while she's lying there in shock, she can still speak for a few minutes or a few seconds or what have you after this has happened. And she says to the survivors, after the helicopter's gone away, "Carry me along with you a little ways so I can breastfeed my infant one last time, and then set me down when I die." And they did exactly that. The men picked up the half of a woman, not yet a corpse, and that half of a woman held onto her baby and breastfed as they walked along a little ways. And after some time, they felt the body turn lifeless, and of course it wasn't holding onto the baby quite the same way anymore. And they put the body down, took the body out of her arms, and then went along the rest of the way. They did eventually escape into the caves they were seeking there in the mountains. And the woman who told me that story survived the war, learning to read and write at a chalkboard in a cave in the high mountains, northwestern Vietnam. So, that is the story I attempted to tell in 200 words when this job application asked me to describe an experience that had changed my life and my place in the world. And it's a moving story. It's a memorable story. But the truth is, it didn't really change me hearing that story and having that experience. Really, an example of something that did change me. If you look through this channel, there's a recent video. The title is something like Cocaine and the Philosophy of Science. That actually discusses a book that really changed me. And the reason why it changed me was, of course, that I'd gone through some prior learning, some prior experience, and then reading that book was a turning point where things changed, my attitudes changed, my outlook changed, and so on. This story, even though moving, about the woman in the mountains, the helicopter, and so on, I already knew all that stuff, at least in broad outlines. I already read survivors' accounts of the war. I was aware of many other examples of things like that happening. So there's no reason why hearing this one further story would actually change me as a person. So I could say more on that, but actually it's an interesting question. What are the experiences and what are the stories that really change you, as opposed to things that are maybe dramatic, but that leave you unchanged. What changes you is understanding. You can do a lot of suffering without gaining any understanding, and you can sometimes gain a new understanding without doing so much suffering. But we'll see if I get the job. So look, guys, my reason for sharing this video with you is partly because for me, I do not have a real separation between my internet presence and my real life. This video does not exist to talk about just politics or just economics or just the study of languages. It also doesn't exist to just talk about veganism or some other issue that may have brought you here. It certainly doesn't exist just to talk about my past history as a scholar of Buddhism, although I do still talk about Buddhism from time to time. This channel talks about me and my life and what's going on. And what's going on with me right now is that I'm applying for a whole bunch of jobs. Within the last week, as I recall, I applied for 2 different jobs in Japan, 1 job in Myanmar. And I'm using the word job here to include all sorts of opportunities, whether they are paid internships, whether they are co-op jobs arranged by my university, or whether they are just directly talking to an employer. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Yeah, there was 1 more job in Japan I forgot about, just in the last week that I applied for. I'm pursuing new work through at least 4 different methods as I categorize things in my own head. And one of those methods that may surprise you, surprise a lot of people, is that I have formally applied to join the Canadian military. And I am now going through the testing and interview process that begins admission to the Canadian Armed Forces. Different people react to that news in different ways. As I've mentioned in recent videos, many of my professors, not all, but many, really do talk to me as an equal and a friend, which is wonderful. I have professors who I, go out for coffee with, and really, we talk as equals, which is wonderful. And again, it's not all professors. There are a couple professors who I think hate my guts, and it's okay. Some of you watching this channel right now may hate my guts, and that's also okay. But it's interesting to see how powerless and frustrated they feel, because many of my professors regard me as an unusually talented student, an unusually bright student or brilliant student. I mean, some of them say very flattering things about me, which is nice, and use words like brilliant, of course. Just saying. They see me as somebody with potential. But the reality of the conversations I'm having with them is that we're talking about the details of exactly how my potential is going to waste, and very likely how it is going to continue to go to waste, how it is really going to be snuffed out. So some of these guys I've been talking to for a year and a half now. And it's like, well, a year and a half ago we were talking about MA programs and PhD programs for me, or we were talking about other possible career paths for me. And these professors didn't have any positive answers, didn't have any positive opportunities to talk about with me. They were all kind of hanging their heads and saying, it's hopeless. Nothing positive to tell you. And now I'm telling them, well, I'm joining the Army. And they react in all sorts of different ways to that. Some positively. One professor in particular really said that he felt that joining the Army would be an honorable path for me to take, and he saw it very positively. Others regard it very negatively, and they feel sort of crushed and set back and shocked, and don't see how this fate could have happened to me. Again, given that they perceive me as an unusually talented, promising, bright student, as someone who, in theory, could do all kinds of positive jobs in the world. And in the past, I have done all kinds of jobs. That's another story. But the reality is, with Canada, joining the Army is a very slow process. It would be at least 12 months between the present and my beginning active service. And that is partly because of extensive background checks and security checks. So it is not a case that I will be, in the near future, looking at an either-or decision between getting a job and joining the Army. I would say it's quite likely the Army, the first process, will be even 18 months. I won't go into why. So 18 months is long enough that I could move to Japan, work for a full year, and in theory I could even move back to Canada after that year, and still not have actually signed up for the Army if they want me, and if I decide I want the work. So I am applying for many different jobs in many different corners of the world. As I mentioned, one of the jobs, I guess two of them, have been really related to my humanitarian background. One in Japan, one in Myanmar. I am applying for straight up work as an English teacher, including in Japan. And one of my reasons for sharing this stuff with you now, I mean, if you're watching this in the year 2030, it's kind of a different situation. But if you're watching this right now in the year 2016, you guys are a part of my life. My viewers can change my fate. And at least one of my viewers already, who got in touch with me, and we had a couple different conversations, he actually took a copy of my CV, of my resume, and gave it to his boss. It was about a particular job that he thought I was well suited for, blah, blah, blah. So already a couple of different people I've known through the internet have tried to help me and tried to get involved with my current job search. That's about it. Look, man, I don't talk about it every video. I don't want to ruin anyone's day. But yeah, fundamentally, there is huge pressure on me because I have a 2-year-old daughter. And still, it is possible I'll never see my 2-year-old daughter again. I also have a very expensive lawyer. But if I ever do want to see my 2-year-old daughter, the cost of doing that, geographically, legally, and otherwise, is enormous. So I have pressure on me to earn money, not just for her, not just to support her, but also to support my spending time with her. And that's partly made even more difficult because both short-term and long-term, I don't really know where she's going to be living in the world. They're not really based in France. No point getting into it. And also when they first moved to France, I was told that was just temporary and that within a number of weeks they were going to move from France to either New York or Seattle. So there are all these different things that push and pull at it. But yeah, one way or another, I already lost more than 10 years of my life becoming a scholar of Buddhism. I don't have those 10 years back to do over again. I can't waste another 10 years developing expertise in some area of scholarship that can't possibly get me a job. Although I don't need a career today, I need to have a career direction today. And yeah, these are all factors that, despite my relatively deep knowledge of atrocities committed in war by all sides, click through this channel. Boy, if you think the communists didn't commit any atrocities in war, I have a lot of videos on this channel discussing in depth mass murder by communists. But yeah, there's also, of course, atrocities committed by the American side and so on. I'm aware of all that. But I am looking at making the decision of joining the Canadian military, and joining the military at a time of war.